Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now, in today's episode, we're continuing on with the Platform 2 building, and we're now moving on to modelling up the canopy. So before we jump into the canopy build, I'd just like to take this opportunity to offer my huge thanks and appreciation for all the wonderful feedback and positive and encouraging comments that are left on my videos. And in particular, I'd like to offer my thanks to David Murray. He is the first chap to offer a super thanks on my channel. So David Murray, thank you so much. That's, of course, bought me a cup of coffee. So where we left off from the previous episode, of course, we'd modelled the roof and also part of the chimney, the base structure of the chimney. And of course, I had mentioned that we were going to get on to the ridge capping and completing the chimney, but I've decided to tackle the canopy instead, because really what I need to do in this particular situation is really work out the tolerances of my laser cutter and how fine and detailed it can do these wrought iron canopy supports. So I think without further ado, let's just jump into what I got up to. So just when I thought I'd probably actually cut the smallest known pieces to mankind out of my laser cutter, I've now actually encountered this stuff, and this is quite crazy, the amount of detail I can actually get out of the laser cutter. And of course what we're looking at is the canopy structure, and this is purely an experiment at this stage. It's nothing more. It's not a final piece in any way. It's that kind of proof of concept situation here where I've cut out these cast iron or wrought iron, whatever they are, brackets, and this is a modified design, so it's not really a representation of whatever the brackets used to be on this canopy, because they're long since gone and there's no real decent photos of them, so it's very much guesswork. So this is one particular method I'm trying just to see how it goes, and if it works then I'll adopt the method, otherwise I'll be back to the drawing board. So it's using a combination of materials too. So we've got 2mm MDF, we've got 1.25mm case board, and we've got 0.55mm black card. So it's using all the materials. And yeah, so the interesting thing is that some of the photos that I had of the Platform 2 building, and of course these are not all at the same station, but as I've said, there were 3 stations that were pretty much identical in terms of their architecture, the buildings themselves. So the interesting thing in 2 photos, the brackets are actually still there on the wall, but the canopy's gone, and you can had never noticed it until I sort of looked closer. It's very difficult to pick out. The photos aren't very good at all in terms of quality or their size, and I just can't get hold of higher res images. But these brackets are actually still mounted to the wall, but the canopy and everything else has completely disappeared. And then of course there's other photos where of course the brackets are gone as well. So there was obviously a staged destruction of the Station 2 building. So although I still can't really tell what the cast iron pattern was like, it probably wouldn't have been much help anyway if I knew, because it would have probably been a lot more intricate and detailed than this, because one of the things I have to do and factor in here is scale of proportions or scale of sizes, and there's simply just some things you cannot replicate into a 1 in 76 scale, and particularly with a laser cutter as well. So I think this is about as close as I can get with intricacy, and get that word right, in terms of these cast iron, and I do think they are cast iron brackets. So yeah, it's quite interesting that these photos actually show this, the brackets there. Now the only photo that shows or at least shows a reasonably, I wouldn't actually say even reasonable, but as good a photo as I can get of a fully intact canopy, it only just shows us the end of it and a very small amount of it. And using all of these photos, I was able to really sort of work out how high this canopy was up and how wide it was roughly, and based on that worked it out on the computer. And another photo which, although the canopy is pretty much obscured by the footbridge, you can actually see the angle of the roof line, and as far as I can tell, the canopy roof line is actually just slightly different to the roof line of the actual building. It's slightly shallower. So I have based it on this photo that there is a slight change in the pitch of the roof. It's very delicate, this stuff, and the idea is what I'm going to do is actually assemble all of this, because I was sort of thinking about painting card and then laser cutting it out as I've done with other components, but because it's so intricate and fine, what I sort of feel I'm more inclined to want to do is assemble the whole thing, and then I'm going to spray paint the whole thing with a primer, and that way the primer might sort of soak into the card a bit. It might just give it that little bit of strength, of durability. And once I've primed it, then I think I'll just select whatever's going to be a base colour, because I'd imagine that the wrought iron brackets would be in the red, the deep red, but then I think the end pieces, the canopy, which appear to be timber, and of course the valance that goes around the canopy, which has that sort of, well, for want of a better description, sawtooth edge along the bottom, and of course that is timber as well, but it's not in the red as far as I can tell. I think it's in a different colour, being a sort of a lighter, possibly beige type colour. So I think that's what will be the base colour. But then I'll go over and hand paint in any of the red parts, which of course will be the wrought iron. So these two components here are the end pieces, which are going on the other side, and then we've just got some supporting kind of like rafter type things here, and I've just made this up because there's no images showing the underside of the canopy. It's just sort of make believe, but and as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty confident that the canopy didn't have a ceiling in it, so it didn't have a flat ceiling like I've seen canopies that although they have the slope of the roof on top, the ceiling cavities enclosed, but it wouldn't be on this because it would actually go through the middle of the windows. So I believe it's open underneath. So that's the frame and the canopy supports, and now I'm going to have to find something to support this while I look at these parts on the other side. Right, so I've just got two bits of square dowel here I can rest this canopy across, because what I do need to do now is attach these components to the other side, which is going to create our structure for the roof to actually be applied over the top. So I had a question actually about the actual material for the top of this canopy roof, because with the lack of photos, or good quality photos, that there aren't any that really clearly show what the roof might be made of. But in some photos you can tell that it's a different tone, it's a different shade of colour or intensity of the tone compared to the main roof. So based on that, I'm thinking maybe the canopy wasn't slate, and maybe it was some form of tin or corrugated iron of some sort. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that. It would be quite handy, but I'm sort of tending to lean towards a potentially corrugated iron, and I'm wondering whether it might have been something like that, and of course it hasn't lasted nearly as long as the slate on the roof has, and has it rusted, and rather than being restored or repaired, the railway company just decided, let's just tear these down rather than actually repaint them or reclad them in new tin. So that's what my sort of thought process is behind that. Now, whether or not it was corrugated tin or was it flat sheets of tin, something like that. So I'm just applying these, what I'm going to call valances, which is this sort of vertical timber battens with this serrated edge on the bottom. They probably have a proper name, but I'm not sure what that is. And this has just been laser cut from 1.25mm caseboard. Now, interestingly, the question I had earlier about what the roof material would have been on this canopy, and I did have the question, and that question still stands, but I did do a bit of research and found all manner of materials that were used on the upper side of the canopy roof, including corrugated iron. There was of course slate as well, and then also pressed steel, so sort of flat sheets of steel that were, I guess, clamped at ridges at various intervals, and these often actually lined up or matched the same distance that any glass sections, if there were glass sections of canopy as well. So my plan is to go down the route of flat tin that is obviously has seams in it every so often or at various intervals, and of course the interval is the same as the glass canopy intervals. So that's not on perfectly straight, but then I'm actually not too worried about it, because often these canopies weren't in the best shape, and quite often you actually saw pieces missing out of them, bits that have fallen off and so forth. So I might just leave it as it is with a bit of a wonky end to it. Right, so that's the trim around there, or the valance, or whatever you want to call it. Now here I actually have a piece of a corrugated type iron finish, and this is from, I believe it's Ratio, or it could be Wills, and I think it's just clear plastic, but it's got a primer over it. So originally I was sort of thinking, well, let's just put some corrugated iron on here, but as I said, I think I'm going to go down the route of flat panels. So I'm just trimming out a base section of card, so this will actually sit over the initial base card that we've got there, and it'll just give it a little bit of extra depth to it as well, but it needs to be slightly deeper so that it overhangs further. And originally I'd cut out this, laser cut out that, and it's actually still a little bit on the thin side, so I'm just sort of hand cutting a section here that's going to actually overhang this front section or fringe that runs along around the front here, and it will slightly overhang at the ends as well. So that's what's going to go there. Now in order to get these sort of, I guess, seams or ridges in the roof panels, what I've done is laser cut out essentially kind of a bit like a ladder, and rather than putting individual strips on and measuring it out and trying to work out where it goes, I've just laser cut out this whole thing one piece, and what we're going to do is actually glue it on to one side of this, and then once the glue's set, then I just simply trim the top and the bottom off, and then you end up with your ridges. Now I'm thinking probably it's going to be easier for me to work with some PVA glue for this rather than rocket car glue, because by the time I get down to this end of one of these seams, that end will be dry. So that's the finish for the top of the roof, and I think that's going to work out quite well and possibly be a little bit more in keeping, of course, with the glass canopy that's on the main station building. So with the canopy structure complete and fully assembled, of course it was in a case of running over it with a primer. So I've just used a Tamiya fine grey primer, and I've gone over that 3 times, so 3 very light coats, and of course on the final one at the moment So once the primer coats were fully dry, of course, I then went over it with a base colour, and I've just used once again a Tamiya colour, and this is just simply a colour that I had on my shelf, which is TS68 Wooden Deck Tan. Now it actually looks a little bit like the GWR beige or sandstone colour that they had, and I think it makes a reasonably good colour representation of the timber work around the canopy. So I'm now finishing off this canopy with the, well, finishing colours, I guess, and this includes a grey for the roofing iron, and I'm actually using a Tamiya XF colour number 84. It's called Dark Iron, and it kind of actually looks like it's a slightly metallic colour. I could be wrong, but it sort of looks like it's got a bit of a fleck in it. But I'm starting with the roof colour first, because generally this Tamiya paint dries reasonably quickly, and if I get the roof down and that dries, then we can move on to the cast iron brackets underneath, which of course are going to be in the red, and of course that I'm using the red which has been decanted from a spray can so that we get the same red match. That's what I did for the gable ends, the barge boards. So at the moment I'm just doing this edge along here, which is very close to the timber fringe along here, and of course I don't want to get grey on that part, so it's a little bit delicate getting this paint in here. So I'll speed through the remainder of this roof colour, and then we'll catch up again when I'm getting on to the cast iron supports and the red. So I'm now going through the very tricky part of hand painting these wrought iron supports, and with a paint that's probably really not designed to be brushed on, as it's from a aerosol can. So I'm not going to drag you through the painting process of this, but you can clearly see there's quite a bit of intricate detail here, and because these are of course right next to other parts of the canopy structure, I really don't want to get any paint on the other parts. So we'll come back to this once I've got these supports all painted up. So you've rejoined me as I put the finishing touches to the last of the brackets, and it's certainly not one of the modelling tasks that I enjoy doing, although the general outcome is not too bad, but doing this very intricate painting is not my forte. And of course I'm so nervous about paint ending up on other parts of this that I don't want it on, that end up getting the shakes trying to get this stuff on here. So it certainly is tricky. So one of the things you'll notice here is we've got some supports along here, and I've left them in. It's simply part of the construction method that I've used to put this together, but once this is painted up and dry, I'm actually cutting those supports out, because they wouldn't have been there, I don't think, and there would be against the windows in between. There's two parts of the window, the upper window section and the lower section, and that's where these sort of roughly run through, but the only reason I've got them here is just simply for the strength of it while I'm working on it. And once I've finished all of that, then of course I can chop them off. So I think that's got all of those painted up. So we're now just going to let that dry, and the next you'll see it will be attaching it to the platform 2 building. Right, so the time has now come to attach this canopy to our building, and I'm just using rocket card glue for this. And as you can see, those cross members here have now been removed, because if I'd taken them out or had not had them as part of the assembly construction process, these would have been very flimsy, and I think I might have run the risk of breaking them off on multiple occasions. So I've just left the two little pieces here at the end because they're kind of hidden right at the end, and I think that's just going to add a little bit of surface area for this glue to anchor. So it's just a case of now slotting this up underneath our roof tiles here. And I'm now just going to hold it down for say a minute or two. So as I've previously mentioned, as you assemble something like this, a scratch built kit, and using laser cutting techniques and things like that, you do sort of learn new things along the way. And for example, this canopy here, I'm already looking at how this can be done differently. And I think one of the things that will definitely be done differently is that the actual base structure of the building, I can actually incorporate slots into it so that the rafter beams on the canopy actually slot into slots in the wall, giving it that additional strength. So there's all these different components that as you assemble it, and you sort of think, yes, we can do that in a different way. So that's now anchored in place. I'm just going to be careful while it continues to set, the rocket card glue that is, but I'm actually pretty happy with the overall appearance of this canopy. May not be prototypically correct to the original canopies that used to be there, but as I've discovered, there is simply not enough reference material for me to really figure out what was going on with these canopies. So there's certainly a bit of freelance modelling, freelance license there in terms of the canopy section. So that's the canopy structure now complete, and overall I'm relatively happy with the outcome. Of course, I do feel that the wrought iron components that were laser cut are just slightly overscaled, but I really can't do a great deal about it. There's only so much tolerance in my laser cutter, and also of course with the material. Now of course I could have had these 3D printed if I passed it over to a fellow modeler to 3D print, but I really did want to try and keep most, if not all, of the modeling processes in-house. So I did go over the iron roofing panels with a very fine matte varnish paint, and this is AK Interactive paint, and it does a really matte finish, because I did find that the Tamiya paint was just a little bit on the glossy side. So it was quite interesting when I finally attached the canopy to the building. It really did change the appearance and character of the building quite dramatically, and at first I thought, I'm not sure whether I actually like this. Is this canopy maybe too obtrusive, too big? But I thought I'll investigate a canopy that's in a photograph that you can just make out. And of course this is the photograph where it's obscured, unfortunately, by the footbridge, but I was able to sort of lay over a framework to actually see where the canopy is, and true to form, the proportions and so forth of that canopy look pretty close to what I've modelled. So based on that, I'm sort of happy now that I think this canopy really does quite reasonably represent the canopies that used to be on these Platform 2 buildings. So as I mentioned, of course, during the modelling and assembly process, I look at different ways this could be done, and I'm definitely going to revisit how the canopy is attached to the main building structure, and this will be via some pre-cut slots in the exterior wall. This will then actually allow me to spray paint the wrought iron components separately and then attach them afterwards, so that they're not actually part of the canopy structure as such. The canopy is inserted in the wall, if you can imagine that, and then the wrought iron brackets are then attached afterwards, so therefore I can spray paint them rather than hand paint them. So one of the other things, of course, you'll notice is I've now added some poster frames to the exterior, to either side of the front entrance, and they roughly sort of represent where there is a photo that I saw that had some poster frames either side of the door. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the outcome of this, and even the colour of the timber finish here, which was just a Tamiya spray paint that I just happened to have lurking on my shelf, and that's come out quite well. I'm not sure whether it would have been anything close to that colour, the original canopies. I wonder in some respects if the window frames were white, which I have modelled here, whether the timber finishes for the canopy were white as well. It could have been that way, but I'm quite happy with this sort of colour. It's probably not really GWR colour in a way. It's a little bit more muted than that, but I think it looks the part. So there we have it, the canopy. Of course, the next steps to get onto, as I mentioned in the previous episode, of course, is this ornate ridge capping, and then of course I've got to finish off this chimney. Now I think that then would deem this pretty close to being complete. The only remaining components, of course, is some guttering and downpipes. So I've yet to sort of work out what I'm going to do for that, whether I get an off-the-shelf product, I think Ratio or Wills do some guttering and downpipes, or whether I may fabricate something to suit the building. So I certainly hope you've enjoyed today's episode and gained, once again, some inspiration and ideas for your own layouts. Do take care, everyone. Look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.